Hey, what's going on? This is the Leafs Convo. Norm along with Mike. It is Sunday, March 5th, 2023. The NHL trade deadline has come and gone. The Leafs made their adjustments, made their acquisitions, did their trades. They are done their dealing, and the beat goes on. 2-2 on their Western road swing. Started with the win in Seattle, and last night, geez, kerplunk in Vancouver against just a disgraceful organization, a terrible team. 1-1 into the third, Mike, and then they gave up not one but two shorthanded goals to lose 4-1 to the Canucks. Michael Augello. The Leafs have made their changes, and they're all in. But what we're seeing right now reminds us of the Maple Leafs going back weeks, months, seasons. How leafy. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Norm. Yeah, the game last night had a lot to be desired. Typical of this team, that they've lost to bottom dwellers. It's you rattle them off like songs: San Jose, Anaheim, Montreal, Chicago, Columbus. It's like it just goes on and on. Sheldon Keefe after the game said, well, we dominated the first period, and I think they had like 18 shots. It was like 18-3 or something like that, and they couldn't beat Thatcher Demko. And Thatcher Demko in the past has really played well against them. And then they get a goal, and then the Leafs are sort of behind the eight ball, and you see a bunch of pushback from Vancouver physically and offensively. And honestly, I think the most encouraging thing about last night's game was the fact that Matt Murray was really good. After being out for, I think, 6 weeks with the ankle injury, he makes this incredible save on a 2-on-0, another save on a breakaway, kept them in the game. And then, this is the Leafs' vaunted power play, giving up 3 shorthanded goals, 1 in Calgary, 2 in Vancouver, and last night 2 goals in 44 seconds to essentially give away the game to a team that they should beat in a town where I just love, the love that the Maple Leafs generate, especially in Western Canada, but throughout the league, where the organ player in Vancouver is Leafs suck, and that's the and they're constantly doing it. I guess that that's their Stanley Cup, because they're not going to make the playoffs, so they can enjoy their CBD oil and their pot and in Vancouver, and enjoy watching other teams play hockey in April and May and June.
Mr. Political, Michael Augello from Cheektowaga, New York. I'm Norm, OG's Converse. Thanks so much for being here. Let me know how this feed looks. We've made a couple of adjustments, and I'm interested in getting your feedback. We'll talk about the Ryan O'Reilly injury. Jeez, that sucks. If he's back in the playoffs, that's great, but I'd like to see him play between now and the playoffs. 19 games to go. So we'll get into that in just a little bit. But funny thing about Matt Murray, though, Mike, is it's great that he's making spectacular saves, but I really don't want him to have to.
Well, right? Yeah, that's the thing that I take from the game that's discouraging, is they really, in a sense, hung him out to dry. You would think that you'd put together a really good defensive effort for a goaltender who'd been out for 6 weeks, but it's almost like you have to factor in it was the third game in 4 nights. I get that. But it was the worst team of the 3 teams that you played in the third game in 4 nights. And you had, purportedly the guy who was your 1A or 1B in goal. And really the defensive effort from the team was lacking. I do think that this and I understand why Sheldon Keefe is doing it. The last 2 games, they're playing 11 forwards and 7 defensemen. And the reason that they're doing it is because they want to get Eric Gustafsson and they want to get Luke Schenn into the lineup. And Eric Gustafsson is a extra piece. He's a luxury. He's somebody who I thought that they were going to trade before the deadline to recoup some draft capital. And what they're doing the last couple games is the reason why, because now they have an unmanageable 9 defensemen, and none of them they can send to the Marlies to clear a space. So now they have 3 defensemen when they play 6. They have 3 defensemen who are not going to play. So now they're going with 11 and 7, and by doing that, you're mixing up your forward lines. And I mean, I don't think that's something that they're going to continue to do. I think eventually they'll go back to 12-6. But I think the reason that they're doing it is because they want to get these new players that have been put into the lineup. They want to get them some work and maybe evaluate them. But I don't think it works. And I think play 6 defensemen, and there are certain ones that have to sit. And the one who wears number 3 should be one of the ones who should sit.
Oh, geez, Converse. What are you thinking about this? Mike, can Eric Gustafsson quarterback a power play? David Hayna. The Leafs played so bad yesterday. For the love of God, take Riley off the power play. He is useless back there. Did pick up an assist on the John Tavares goal, but let's make no mistake about it. And I think we're the consensus is widespread and nearly unanimous. This has not been Morgan Riley's best season. Not to pick on him, but we know this. He's not really doing much to show that he's improving. He might be incrementally. He might be, from the management's perspective, from the coaching staff's perspective. But from what fans are seeing, they're not exactly pleased. It hasn't been the best season for him. We can, in looking back on his career with this season in mind, I'm sure we can give him a mulligan. But in these moments right now, he's part of that core 4 plus 1, core 5. I mean, he's got to find a way to step up and really be integral into this team's success.
It hasn't been the best year for him, but I just, and he was -3 last night. But he was -3 because they gave up 2 shorthanded goals on the power play. And that's, that's the main reason. And then I think the other goal that he was on the ice for was the goal that made it 4-1. And at that point, they're just pressing to try to get back in the game. So I'm not making excuses for him, but I don't think that the defensive problem is Morgan Riley. I think the problem is that you've got a core group right now. And last night was another indication. Austin Matthews took a shot off of his knee. He was out for the first part of the second period and then was laboring around the rest of the game. I know that, people are complaining about Riley and that he's not engaged, that he's not, he came back from the knee injury and I think he was struggling a little bit after that. I don't see any big problem with him lately, but the thing is that you can't put him with Justin Hall. You have to put him with TJ Brody. You have to allow Riley to do what Riley does, which is jump into the offensive attack. And Brody is like a safety net. If you have Justin,
Mike, if we've got this figured out, why doesn't the fucking head coach do the same thing? Like, because
the head coach likes Justin Hall and believes in Justin Hall. And I don't understand that. when the playoffs roll around, if Morgan Riley is paired with Timothy Liljegren or paired with TJ Brody, then I think he'll be, you could say, well, he's a number 1 defenseman. He should be able to play with anybody. He's a really good number 2. He's not a number 1. A number 1 is Victor Hedman. A number 1 is Roman Josi.
There's the problem. He's the number 1 on the Leafs, but in your eyes, he's a really good number 2.
Right.
So that will definitely leave something to be desired. And that number 2 to number 1, the disparity there, there's a greater disparity there than just one number. Like there's a lot more to going into being a quarterbacking number 1 bona fide stalwart to a good useful number 2, which Morgan Riley would weight against versus the rest of the league's top guys. On the Leafs, he's number 1, but he's not a number 1 kind of guy, and there's your problem.
Yeah, and I mean, like I'm seeing things in the chat, like Riley's really a number 3 or he's a number 6 on Boston. I mean, that this is the Leaf fan hatred that is just like destroying their own. And I think Riley is a good number 2. I don't think he's not a number 1. He's an average number 1. And you can tell that this is something that the Leafs recognize in terms of they needing to have on defense, more depth on defense, and the fact that Elliot Friedman reported last night that they were inquiring about Mattias Ekholm and even Erik Karlsson before the deadline. Now, neither one worked because I'm assuming the package that the Oilers gave for Ekholm, or needing to retain salary on Karlsson, that they wouldn't do for the Oilers, is the same reason the Leafs couldn't be interested. But there is a recognition there that there needed to be an upgrade on the blue line. And I think Jake McCabe at $2 million is a good ad. I still am a little worried about his durability. But in Luke Schenn, you could see, him being a hitter, but he's a guy whose minutes are going to have to be managed. And that, that's the whole thing. It's like, you've got a really good number two. Brody is a solid 20-plus minute a night defenseman. They're going to use McCabe in a top four role. And then really it's going to be sort of hit or miss. It's going to be piecing together the rest of the blue line going in the playoffs against a team like Tampa Bay, who's extremely deep and extremely talented. And I think the one thing I carried from the game last night that was scary, at least there was a little bit of pushback against a team like Vancouver, who were worked up in a lather. You had a couple instances where your team captain, where John Tavares, gets labeled head high by a couple of by Tyler Myers, and I can't remember who the second hit was. I think it was Dakota Joshua, former Leaf draft pick. And Jake McCabe jumped in against Myers and got his clock clean, but he jumped in and responded. But the whole point is that there's nobody to discourage a team from doing that to your star players. And, that's why, maybe getting somebody like a Austin Watson at the deadline would have been a good idea. They didn't do that. So now it's, you have pushback. You have
these trades for. Sorry, Mike. And again, what were all of these trades for? Here we are, still not content. I mean, still complaining after all of these guys coming in, 3 defensemen, 3 forwards. What was it all worth, Mike, if we're still here and we still look at this team and say, holy shit, there's still not enough pushback, still not an ace defenseman.
There is
Matthews playing to his best ability. Where are we? That's the thing. All of these changes, and has anything really changed?
Well, the difference is that now there is some pushback, whereas before the deadline and before the deals were made, the pushback was Michael Bunting. It's like you McCabe and Schenn and a few other, and Achari. There's some hitters and there's some pushback there. So I do think that they are a markedly better team after acquiring the 6 players that they did, but they didn't go a step further, and I think they needed to. Whether it works or not, I mean, we will see. All I can say is, like, defensively, sandpaper wise, physically, they're better after the deals that they made, but they expended a lot of draft capital in getting that, and some of it's permanent and some of it's going to last longer than a year, because McCabe's got 2 years and Lafferty's got a year, and I think there's a good chance they re-sign O'Reilly. But I have to pat myself on the back, because I said it for 3 or 4 months. This team was not going to trade Alex Kerfoot. And Elliot Friedman reported that the reason that they made the deal with St. Louis and then Minnesota to share O'Reilly's salary was specifically to keep Kerfoot. Now, Kerfoot could move to the middle if O'Reilly's out for a few weeks, or they move up Achari or whatever, or they call up Pontus Holmberg. They have flexibility, but they were never going to trade Alex Kerfoot. He's too important to the special teams on this team and to be able to play wing and center. They were never going to do it, and people wanted them to trade him, wanted them to trade Engvall, wanted them to trade Hall. Okay, it's just like, those players individually are not the problems with this team. What is going to be a problem, and we've seen it repeatedly over and over and over with this team throughout the year, is when the core group doesn't show up, this team doesn't win. And last night, in a third game in 4 nights, the core group didn't show up.
So John Cooper benched his stars, and we don't want to keep up with the Tampa Joneses, and I get a lot of that. Well, Tampa lost. Well, Tampa this, Tampa that. Tampa doesn't have to explain itself in this moment. Tampa's explained itself through winning championships, and until that whole organization unravels, you
Yeah.
still have to give them the benefit of the doubt. But John Cooper sent a message to his big players, and again, he's coaching. He made a decision. He's got the pedigree. They understand what they need to do. I guess Sheldon Keefe was asked whether he would pull off a move like that with his guys to send a message, and he scoffed at it.
Yeah. Well, I'm calling bullshit on what John Cooper did, because they played the Sabres with Brian Elliott, their backup goalie, in goal. They were losing 4-1 going into the third period. They weren't going to win that game. So they were playing a second of back-to-back today against Carolina. It was more for load management than it was for punishment. He can say anything he wants in the post game. I don't think it was because he was punishing his three best forwards. I think it was the fact that they were going to be playing a game today, and he wanted them rested for the second game so they could have a chance to win against Carolina with Vasilevsky in goal. Saying that all of a sudden, I'm not getting anything out of Stamkos and Point and Kucherov. I'm going to punish them for sitting them in the third period. It's bullcrap. And again, Sheldon Keefe doesn't have that luxury. John Cooper's won 2 Stanley Cups. Sheldon Keefe hasn't won a round. He can't risk losing that room and benching Austin Matthews or benching Mitch Marner or benching William Nylander. He's done that for a shift.
Read that one, Mike, from Johnny. Keefe can't criticize these guys. Too worried about AM leaving.
No, I don't think he's worried about Austin Matthews leaving, because I think if Kyle Dubas loses his job, Sheldon Keefe loses his job. He knows that he can't lose those core guys. They have no chance to win if he loses them. But
if he gets confrontational and says, "Guys, you're 6 years into this thing. Where are you?"
It's up.
That's too much for him to do. Like these players are too soft that they can't confront their own problems and their own deficiencies and their own lack of achievement.
We don't know what they say in the locker room. We just know what they say to the media. And coming out in the media, especially in Toronto, and saying what John Cooper said about his players. And again, somebody in the chat was like, did you see what John Cooper said? Yeah, I saw what John Cooper said. I saw it. It doesn't matter. If he talked to his players after the game and said, that's the thing. You don't know what Sheldon Keefe is saying in the locker room, but he's going to say what he says in the media, because if he says something critical to the Toronto media about his players, he loses the room. John Cooper can say anything he wants to the Tampa Bay media, all 3 reporters that are there. So, I mean, they're different circumstances.
Three reporters turns out to be 3 million people. That once that information is uploaded, everybody gets their hands on it. Never mind let's not pat ourselves on the back for being Toronto media or covering the Maple Leafs. The Leafs are no more than anybody else, Mike, and you know that.
They're different circumstances, and they're 2 organizations in different places. The Tampa Bay Lightning have won 2 Stanley Cups and finished, and we're in a Stanley Cup final. Okay, so and Cooper is arguably the best coach in the league, so he's got the gravitas to be able to do that.
Right.
Sheldon Keefe is widely acknowledged as a very good head coach, but he hasn't won anything. And I think it's one of those situations where you win more friends with honey than with vinegar. And I don't think him coming out and tearing down his team, specific players like Cooper did, is a benefit. Now, Keefe, after the Edmonton game on Wednesday, he was like, they were disinterested, and they, basically they had their head up their ass. And that was the truth. He didn't specify one player. He said the group. Now, we know, I know, everybody in the chat knows, if Matthews, Marner, Tavares, Nylander, and Riley don't show up against Tampa, they're going to lose. No matter what they did in terms of adding support players, secondary, tertiary players, if those guys don't show up, they're going to lose. And when Kyle Dubas is no longer the general manager after this year, if they lose in the first round, then it's going to be up to the next general manager to decide which one of the core group gets traded, because there is going to be a change in that core group if they prove that they cannot win 7 years in a row.
I think, Mike, that Kyle Dubas has taken a lot of the heat that was directed at the entire organization off himself. He's done what he can with what he has. Yes, they expended draft capital, but they brought some back. And if you think you're a contender and you're about to make a move and you've been trying to take moves over the last several years and to no avail, you have to use draft capital. Okay, this isn't just about signing your own guys. They go away, you replenish. Like that's Tampa Bay Rays, right? If you're going to go to another level, you're going to have to do a combination of things to make yourself better. But Kyle Dubas has done what he can with what the resources at his disposal to make the surrounding group who are there to help accelerate the process, but also more deeply complement the core five. Right? He said, "I've done my part, guys. Here you go. It's not perfect, but you guys are among the best core group of players that any team has in this league. So here are your reinforcements. Have at it." These dudes owe it to Kyle Dubas to step their games up, because we've been going on over the last several years. Is it the core group or is it the support system? Maybe it's a bit of both, but that support system has been strengthened to a really, really high degree over the last several weeks. So it's up to the core five now to lead the way. Their general manager's done what he can. Sure, the head coach is under scrutiny, and things are getting, it's not an easy process for him, because when he looks like he's done something right, someone will find something to criticize him for. When he's done something wrong, bam, that's the reason why he's a shitty head coach and should be back in the AHL. The general manager's done what he can, and at the end of the day, it's really just up to the players to not necessarily thank him, but reward him with the play that they would like to produce and had wanted to produce, pending getting the support. Well, now it's here, guys. 19 games to go. You're going to have to put Vancouver in the rearview mirror and get at it. But the general manager's done what he can, and I don't have a lot of criticism for Kyle Dubas any longer. It's up to the rest of the group, and depending on how far they go, we can digest what's happened and prognosticate what's going to happen next. But Kyle Dubas has done his part, and that's just the way I see it.
Well, just think of it this way, because, contending teams like Tampa and Boston and other teams out there expended a lot of draft capital to improve their chances in the short term. Boston gets Bertuzzi and Orlov and Hathaway, and Tampa Bay gets Jeannot. So what Kyle Dubas did was not as severe as them, and I think improved his team almost as much. But when he's operated without draft capital, let's see, 2021, who is their pick in the second round? Oh, yeah, it's Matthew Nyes. And then they had a pick in the fifth round, and they took Ty Voigt. Ty Voigt was, for most of the year, leading the Ontario Hockey League in scoring. So it's better to have draft capital, and they did recoup a first-round pick in the deal for Rasmus Sandin, which I know that you pointed out before we started recording that Rasmus Sandin had 3 assists in his first game. It was against San Jose. So talk to me when it's an NHL team and not an AHL team. But I like Rasmus Sandin, and I think Rasmus Sandin is going to have a really good NHL career. And in Washington, I don't know whether he's going to be a power play quarterback. He got almost 3 minutes in power play ice time. And I think Carlson's still hurt, so that's the reason. When John Carlson's healthy, he's probably not going to be the power play quarterback, but he's a good player, and you have to give up something to get something. And once they made a deal to get McCabe, then you knew that they were going to trade somebody out. You have to say the last couple games they were without Timothy Liljegren, and he's going to be one of their top 4 guys in the playoffs. So their defense, even though they're playing 7 defenders, which I don't think works, was playing a little shorthanded. Right now, like, people are complaining about Riley, and Riley's coming off a knee injury, and he's not played great, but he's not played badly. People are complaining about Austin Matthews. Austin Matthews took a shot off the knee last night. I don't know if it was the same knee that was injured. He has, he's on pace for 40 goals. I think 38. That's not bad, folks. It's not 60. It's not what Connor McDavid is doing, but it's like I just love the critique of and hey, I was one for many years, Norm, when we were on the hook, and I was a fan turning into a member of the media, and I was critical of the franchise and the way players played. Okay, Austin Matthews is one of the best 2 or 3 forwards in the league.
Right.
And this fan base will lose their crap if he leaves via free agency in 2 years. I don't think he's going to, but you can complain. It's easy to complain about the guys that are there, and then you'll complain more when they're not there. And that's, is he having a great year? Is he having a year as good as he did last year? No. I think that's all erased if he shows up in the playoffs and scores a bunch of key goals. And that's right. We'll see.
OG's Converts, make sure to like the content. Thanks so much to all the new subscribers. Stick around with us. We have plenty of shows to come between now and the beginning of the playoffs, and what we're keeping our fingers crossed will be a run beyond the first round, even though we do sound like we're poo-pooing on the Maple Leafs and consistently do so. However, we really don't have a lot to use as ammunition to support our case that the Leafs are going to beat the Tampa Bay Lightning. Until they do, we're going to be skeptical, but obviously, quietly optimistic. Fans might love individual performances. That's why Connor McDavid is who he is. I mean, he's amazing, but we pedestalize him. Austin Matthews with the
what's he ever won? He's been to one conference final his entire career. What has he ever won?
What I'm telling you, though, is that today fans love the individual aspect of a player. That's that's why you have all of Nylander's. We're all Nylander fans, but guys who are like completely devoted to him, who want to look like him and stalk him and be a part of his life, who will say, well, Nylander was great against the Habs, because he put up the points and stuff. Yeah, that's good. But guess what? He didn't play beyond the first round. So it's about the team mosaic being successful. So with Austin Matthews, he's spoiled so many fans for so long, and now that statistically this year does not measure up to what he's produced in the past, you're going to have people say he's disinterested or he wants to go to Arizona. There's a lingering injury. He's just not playing well. Well, you do the best with what you have at your disposal in terms of health and in terms of just ability in that moment, and it's better than most, even if it's not as good as what you've done in the past. But fans really like the individual performances and efforts of players, and what we're getting at and what I'd like to see is all of these guys firing on on all cylinders. In tandem, in unison, whether guys are getting a ton of points or not, all fighting the good fight for the same cause, and that's to make this Leafs team fully efficient, dependent on one another, and develop this idea and this momentum of a complete full-powered freight train rolling into the playoffs, ready to confront anything that comes at it and take it down. I don't really care if Matthews is scoring as many goals as he did in the past. I'd like to see him D up between now and the rest of the season, as well as the entire team, and play a more defensive type of hockey game. So fuck his goals. I just rather see a guy who's going to be more attentive to the finer points of the game. But he can't be the only one, Mike. And again, this is the dichotomy. It's like, is it the core five or is it the support group? It's both. It's both. We probably wrap up here, Mike. You maybe give us an update on the O'Reilly injury and where you think this is going to go. I mean, that kind of sucks because I like to see him playing out there. And then any last points, we'll get out of here.
Well, Ryan O'Reilly took a shot off of his hand early in the game yesterday, did not come back. if you watch the replay, the shot goes off of I think it was his right hand, and no, it was his left hand. He gripped the stick, but he didn't come back into the game. Now, I'm thinking worst case scenario here, and if it's best case scenario, then that's great. Then it's a bruise or something like that, or a bone bruise or something like that, and he might be out a week or two. If it's a broken finger, or a broken index finger, or a broken metacarpal, which is the bones in deep in your hand. Tyler Bertuzzi had the same injury in Detroit. Actually, he had the same. He had, I think, on one hand with one instance and another hand in the other instance, and he was out around 5 weeks for both. We're 6 weeks away from the playoffs, so if it's a worst case scenario, I think O'Reilly will be back and will be fully healthy. Now, conditioning wise, you can still keep up your conditioning. If it's a hand injury, you can skate, you can be on the bike and things of that nature. So I'm not worried about that. I don't foresee it being anything longer than that would extend into the playoffs. And I don't see it being debilitating like Foligno's injury a couple of years ago. But of course, every Leaf fan is going to say, gee, we trade for this nice new shiny toy and we don't get to see it. Let's just say and I'm not a doctor. I'm just playing one on a podcast. But I'm just saying I looked
okay with the no, he was a corner. Never mind.
He was a corner. I just look at
we may need you, Quincy, in about 6 weeks.
I just look at similar injuries and the time span. So, if they have to put a pin in it and whatever, it's going to take time to heal. But usually a hand injury is no longer than 6 weeks. The Matthews thing, I mean, we'll see if he plays in New Jersey on Tuesday. He took a shot off the knee. He did come back, but he did seem to be labored during the game. So, and you have to say, after the deadline, there is usually a lull. It's sort of the dog days. We know with Major League Baseball, there's the dog days of the season are in August after the trade deadline. And, Tampa Bay is 3-4-3 in their last 10 games. The Leafs are 6-4. So they're both sort of going through that. But where the difference here is, Norm, is that when April 17th rolls around, I have every confidence that Stamkos and Point and Kucherov and Perry and all those guys and Hedman and Vasilevsky will turn it on. Not in every game, but will turn it on, because Vasilevsky was not good early in the series against Toronto, and there were opportunities to beat them, and they didn't do it. But I have confidence that team will show up at that time. This team, I don't know. I think that you have players that will show up. But whether everybody shows up or the key players show up, that's to be determined.
See, we're so excited. The days leading up to the trade deadline, everything that Kyle Dubas did, Ryan O'Reilly with a hat trick in Buffalo. We know that the team, pound for pound on paper, is among the top 10 in the league, if not pushing top 5 and sometimes top 3 on given nights. But OG's converts, how can you blame us for feeling dejected after what we witnessed last night against Vancouver? 4-1 loss, 2 shorthanded goals, guys there, then not there. Forget the injuries. The Leafs, who fancy themselves contenders, should just put these teams away. Like, it's, Tampa lost to a shitty team. I forget them, right? Look at what Boston's doing, Mike. And I've put some posts about the Bruins into community, youtube.com/Leafs Convo/community. I mean, how can you not be, frightened and revere frightened by and revere what the Boston Bruins are doing right now, Mike? They really are the litmus test. 10 straight wins, just clobbering teams. They play like, again, their hair's on fire, but they have commitment and there's a purpose to what's going on. Whereas the Leafs leave a lot to be desired when push comes to shove. So, I mean, we are Leaf fans. We have to love our team. We have to support what we've got, and you keep our fingers crossed and be quietly optimistic. And when that optimistic starts to increase, what happens? It's it's kind of chopped at the knees by a shitty loss to a shitty team. Guys, get on a damn run. Whether O'Reilly's injured, whether Matthews is injured, there's enough hands on deck, Mike, for this team to dominate more nights than not. And on the nights they don't win, still put in a good fucking effort to make us believe that where we're going, will will there will be a benefit at the end of the line, and the big competition to come will bear fruit because these guys are prepared to get the job done. Last word to you, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that I agree with everything that you just said, but the effort has to be there at the right time. They could go on a tear right now, win 17 games in a row, and it would be meaningless because game one of the playoffs is when they need to be where they need to be.
Momentum's a thing, Mike. Momentum's a thing, and the Leafs have not been able to develop any sustained real momentum. And there's still 19 games to play. There's still time, but we haven't seen any indication they're going to be able to get on a crazy run and just, like I said, barrel freight train into the playoffs.
The only team I can remember in recent memory that built momentum in the second half of the regular season and then carried that through into the playoffs was the 93 team. They were, I think they had like less than 10 losses in the second half of the season and then beat Detroit and then beat St. Louis and then went to game 7 against Los Angeles. So that team did it. But this team and that team are different. And, and I think the league is different. So not to say that you can lose 17 in a row and then all of a sudden click your fingers and there it goes. But I do think, they've got to get their house in order. They got to, get their pairings in order and their lines in order and stay healthy. But it needs to be in line and engaged in the middle of April when time comes. And will that happen? We will see.
So into New Jersey, weird way to finish up a Western road swing in New Jersey on Tuesday, but it's going to be tough. There's a ton of tough games to come, and the way it usually works out is the Leafs play better against the tougher teams and just succumb to the crap. So I guess just more of the same. Mike, I'm going to throw this out at you. Kyle Dubas doesn't get fired. He doesn't get fired because he's showing the organization that, hey, he's willing to throw out his playbook and try to do what it takes to augment a group that should be better and help it win. So he like this. These are some real pivotal formative moments in what we all expect will be a lengthy career as a general manager in the league. Sheldon Keefe will if this team doesn't do anything, the Sheldon Keefe will get gassed, and Kyle Dubas will begin dismantling the core four forwards. That's what I'm calling. Would I like to see that happen? No, but that's what I think is going to happen. So this idea that Kyle Dubas is just going to get juiced, I think he's proven to the brass that he's ready to make some adjustments. And who the hell else are you going to bring in? I mean, right? And again, that's down the line. I'm just throwing that out there. I think he's done enough to show that, like, he's again really willing to deviate from the plan and get creative. It's not like he's hamstrung the organization or anything like that. It's up to the coach to find a way to get these guys plugged into the right positions, get them working and motivated. And at the end of the day, it's up to the core 5 with the focus on the core 4 forwards to lead the way. The rest of the guys were brought on to complement, not to grab this team by the collective throat and pull it through. They were here to help thrust the top guys and help get this team to where it needs to be, and that's the second round of the playoffs. So OG's Converse, thanks so much for being here. Like the content, subscribe to the channel. The podcast version of the show will be up here in the next 24 hours. Reach out to us in the community portion of the YouTube channel. Any comments, concerns, anything you want to bring up to us, let us know. Mike and I are around. We'll go back to our weekly shows, but if something comes up that is a cause for concern and that Mike and I really have to collab over, that we will send out a message and let you know to join along. Michael, I hope you have a wonderful Sunday, and I'm looking forward to doing it again soon, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks, Norm.
Have a good one.